Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special episode of the Built on Purpose podcast, where each episode I interview exceptional leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, philosophers, and straight up interesting people to explore their outlook on life, work, and leadership. My hope for our listeners is that you can take away a special nugget of information from each of these interviews, something that will serve you and the people most important to you in pursuing a life built on purpose. My name is Brian Moore, co-founder and managing partner of Y Scouts, and today I'm interviewing Clayton Christopher, an entrepreneur who has founded or co-founded food and beverage brands like Sweet Leaf Tea, Deep Eddy Vodka, and Rhythm Superfoods, to name a few. Clayton is now one of three principals of CAVU, C-A-V-U, which is a fund that invests in consumer products. And for those of you that are curious of what CAVU stands for, Ceiling and Visibility Unlimited. It's an aviation term. Look it up. Clayton has a classic entrepreneurship story, and I promise we'll dive into a few of those stories in this episode. But I'll tell you, the one big thing that stood out to me in chatting with Clayton was that he started Sweet Leaf Tea on $12,000 and his grandmother's recipe before selling the company to Nestle 13 years later for $183 million. We're going to talk about that story in this interview. Clayton is passionate about entrepreneurship. He loves helping small food and beverage companies achieve scale, and he lives in Austin, Texas, the epicenter of consumer innovation. Let's get right to it. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this interview with Clayton Christopher. You've had some major successes over the last handful of years, and it was interesting as I was doing my research. There's some information available on you online, but what's interesting is given some of the pretty big things that have happened over the last several years with the sale of Sweet Tea and of Deep Eddy, and now the launch of, and forgive me, I hope I'm saying it properly, CAVU?
Yeah, CAVU.
CAVU, okay. Ceiling and Visibility Unlimited.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that aviation term. I did a little research on that. Maybe let's start there actually with CAVU, and maybe you can share a little bit about what has driven you from your very humble beginnings and entrepreneurial roots to growing and selling a couple of different businesses to now launching a fund with this aviation terminology underpinning what I assume is very much part of a philosophical view that you and your partners are going to bring.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you like the name and appreciate that. It's definitely, I feel like, the name of whether it's a brand, a product, a company, or even an investment firm should be something that makes the team members aspire, to what you stand for there. And CAVU is the perfect flying conditions, and it's what we aspire to help bring to these companies that we invest in, that we partner with. We certainly don't consider ourselves passive investors, or like my business partner, Rohan Oza, likes to say, a lot of firms are good at, picking winners. We help create winners. We certainly consider ourselves operators first and investors second, because we've spent most of our working life, kind of in the trenches building brands and running companies. So, what we aspire to is to be very value add to these entrepreneurs and CEOs. One of the inspirations behind starting this fund was that over the years, from having sat across, from having had venture capital and private equity firms on my own boards, having been kind of recruited and even compensated by other venture capital and private equity firms to help them on companies that they had invested in, I recognized over the years a significant, what I'd call, gap in what the entrepreneur's definition of value add is and what these private equity firms' definition of value add is. So, we aspire to be really helpful. For that reason, we're not going to be able to make as many investments as the typical, private equity or venture capital firm would. I spend anywhere from 2 to 10 hours a week with the company. That's where the vast majority of my long work weeks, as well as with Rohan, are spent with companies, particular companies that we've invested in. So, that's what gets us out of bed in the morning, and that's what really gives us purpose in our lives and gets me excited. So, CAVU, we felt like was a good term that would keep us excited, motivated, focused. Kind of that, those values that you put on the wall that you got to bring to life. It's real easy for us to say, are we helping and create, ceiling and visibility on the perfect flying conditions for these entrepreneurs? Because a lot of them are doing it for the first time. What they need is a Sherpa to help guide them up the mountain, because there's lots of different, paths to the top of the mountain. And having someone that's gone there a couple of times typically improves your odds exponentially to get there again. So yeah, that's kind of the inspiration behind the name, and what we aspire to help these companies do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That said, as you are in the market, looking at opportunities, digging beneath the surface on some of these entrepreneurial ventures and where you can add the most value, how do you determine that philosophical alignment? Clearly, you've got some you've planted a flag. There's some strong beliefs that you and your partners have. And much of that, likely stems from the experiences that you've had in building cultures and focusing on some of the intangibles that, as a line item, don't show up on the P&L, but they clearly impact the P&L. And
right.
I'd love to, maybe you can share with us a little bit about how you identify when that philosophical alignment is there with some of the entrepreneurs that you meet with.
Sure. The biggest things that we look for when we invest in terms of kind of the on the person side, there's certainly things on the product side, on the business, on the particular category, that these brands are in, but from in terms of investing in people, because that's the biggest bet that you make, and the biggest investment is betting on the team, and betting on the entrepreneur oftentimes. And I'd say the first thing that we look for is integrity and trust. It's got to be someone that we feel like is of high integrity, someone that we trust. I like to call it a learner versus a knower's mindset. Knowers scare the hell out of me, frankly, because I used to be one in the early days of Sweet Leaf, and it almost put us out of business. So I think I had to have be beaten down pretty hard, and kind of come hardened in the fire, and basically just had to go through hell, in the early days of a startup to kind of be broken of that and realize that I was, the most successful companies, the entrepreneur aspires to never be the smartest person in the room, to surround himself with or herself with people that they trust, to have a high level of vulnerability on the team so that you can, shoot holes in each other's ideas in order to distill those to get the best possible strategy and make the best possible decision. So, we learner versus a knower's mindset. Knowers tend to get their heads knocked off because industries change so quickly. I just say you've got to constantly be hungry for knowledge and open to learn. And, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So integrity, trust, learner versus knowers, passion, certainly. I want to see someone that is 100% focused and committed, that when they get out of bed every day, that, and on the weekends, and, I can remember when I was running Sweet Leaf Tea and Deep Eddy Vodka. I mean, I would literally have dreams about the business and about decisions, and oftentimes would wake up in the middle of the night and write down ideas that came to me. Certainly it can get to be a little too obsessive. You have to try to strike a little bit of a balance, but, I want to see an entrepreneur that is incredibly passionate and willing to do whatever it takes to make this work, kind of a can't fail attitude. And certainly is in our investments reflect this, but certainly there's a belief that, they have to be very passionate about the mission that they're on, about the products that they're creating, which are going to be, better for you products. We're huge believers that the vast majority of what we consume, what's available for consumption in conventional grocery stores is not good for you. And, we can't look toward the Cokes, the Pepsis, the Unilevers of the world to create better for you products. That's innovation doesn't happen near as quickly within the Fortune 500 companies. I like to joke, but the two most risk averse people on the planet are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies or publicly traded companies and first year MBAs. So they're so scared of failure. So to expect for those people to, and those huge companies to fix what's wrong with our food, with our beverages, and to innovate it's just asking, it's asking people to do something that's very just unnatural to their basic nature. So you really have to look to the entrepreneurs to do that, who embrace risk with passion, who see the biggest risk is not embracing risk and taking it. That they're going to regret it if they don't put their heart and soul into trying to create change and create these brands. So whether it's our investment in Thrive Market, which was our very first investment that we made, Gunnar Lovelace and his crew there, have a ton of respect for the mission of that company, to BAI, which is a low calorie, high antioxidant, all natural, fruit-based beverage that we recently made a sizable investment into. One of my proudest moments when we were just about to make our investment in Buy, and this was literally just a few weeks ago, I was at an HEB, a very mainstream conventional grocery store here in Austin, Texas, just kind of wandering the aisles as I often do. And there was a overweight ethnic woman drinking a Buy. And I would absolutely have expected her to be drinking a Coca-Cola,
sure,
or a Pepsi. And that, to me, literally, it put a smile on my face, because the whole mission of that company is, and the purpose of the product is you should not have to compromise on taste and on flavor. And with your beverage, you should be able to have something that's delicious, that has bold, full flavors, but is good for you as well. So, we love the mission, the purpose of that company. And, that was just for me, really exciting to see someone in the grocery store, that before they didn't really have an option, it's, so yeah, we certainly look forward, the product's got to be there, but, with the entrepreneur, it's, I always say that over 50% of the equation is the team. It's more important than any product, because if the product's broken or the supply chain's broken or something's fundamentally wrong with the business, the right team can fix it.
So I want to, if we can for a moment, I want to chat about passion and purpose. And specifically, I want to tie it to the place you call home. And I recall one of the grannyisms that had labeled the bottom of one of the sweet tea leaf caps was "Bloom where you're planted." And clearly you've chosen to bloom right where you're planted in Austin, Texas. Can you talk about how important your surroundings have been to you to help you bloom and help those that you're helping bloom?
That's a great question. And I think our surroundings are critical. Where we grow up, where we live day to day, where we work, it influences our thinking. It influences our outlook, the type of people that we choose to surround ourselves with, are incredibly important. And Austin has been, highly influential, I'd say, in my personal development. I feel incredibly, committed and, and passionate about the city. It's a wonderful, wonderful community. It's one of the, I'd say, only communities that I've been close to. I'd say it's one of the only, let's say, major cities that I've witnessed that has a culture that is excited to see other people win. That is a culture where it's very approachable community here of business people and entrepreneurs, to where, you know, it's more easy than most cities to get in front of people that have achieved, you know, in the business world, what most would consider very high levels of success. So people tend to be very approachable. They feel committed. I'd say the community feels committed to give back. They want to help other entrepreneurs. I love that. I had a lot of help along the way, and, you know, I try to do whatever I can to give back to the community and give back to other entrepreneurs, whether it's a coffee, a phone call. I mean, there's probably 6 to 7 of them a week. I can't do all of them, but, you know, I certainly feel obligated to help other people on their journey, because I certainly had a lot of help. And I would say that has come largely from growing up, at least kind of in my more formative years, college and onward, in Austin, Texas. And certainly with Whole Foods being headquartered here, there's a lot of influence that they've had over the city, just in terms of, you know, health and wellness. It's a very interesting intersection here in Austin. We're one of the, perhaps I think the only city in the U.S. where we're one of the top 10 party cities in the U.S., but we're also one of the top 10 healthiest cities in the U.S. So as you can imagine, it's a great place to start a food or beverage brand.
Sure. So a work hard, play hard, certainly, as cliche as it is, Austin certainly fits the bill.
Absolutely. And I would say, just to add on, kind of close that up, one of the reasons why I love this city is, and you can see it in the conversations that are happening in coffee shops all over the city. And when people get together for lunch, people are more interested, vastly more interested in what you do, and the passion behind what it is that you do, than they are how much you make or what car you drive.
That's awesome.
I mean, I think Austin has more people in flip-flops and T-shirts that are millionaires per capita than any other city in the U.S.
That's excellent. I want to touch on, just for a moment, as you were sharing about Austin and the importance of giving back, the co-founder of Ben & Jerry's, Jerry Greenfield, sounds like he had quite an impact on you during some of your earlier years, and that obviously has shaped some of your philosophy and how business can be a force for giving back. Can you share a little bit about Jerry's impact on you, and how your collaboration with him has led you in the direction that you've gone?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I'm in a kind of a transition office now, but I had a picture of in my last office, and it will be up as soon as I get it into a more permanent home here. But I have a picture of me and my best friend and co-founder of Sweet Leaf Tea, David Smith, and Jerry, in front of one of our old Sweet Leaf Tea school buses that we had kind of decorated out. But, you know, I didn't spend a lot of time with Jerry, and, you know, shame on me, I haven't kept up with him, but he came and spent some time with David, myself, and kind of our whole team in Austin, and then we had a couple of calls, and he was very influential. I mean, as most people know, I mean, Ben and Jerry's were some of the just leading thinkers and leading company in conscious capitalism and purpose and having a mission that was just much bigger, you know, than the company, than making ice cream, and certainly in giving back to the community. So, you know, if it wasn't for Ben and Jerry's, you know, I think that it would have taken our country longer to evolve, and a lot of these companies longer to evolve, and just the whole conscious capitalism movement. So, you know, there's certainly kind of, I'd call them the godfathers. But, you know, I was highly inspired. You know, Sweet Leaf, we had we were organic. We were doing that for, reasons that we felt like were the right reasons. Tea leaves didn't don't get washed until you put them in a hot cup of water or a 10,000 hot gallon vat, a stainless steel vat, and brew them with water as we were doing it Sweetly. So, for health reasons, we felt like that was very important. But the giving back to the community was, I'd say that's where Jerry really inspired us, because we were outside of a better for you product and knowing that the working conditions were better for a lot of these workers. Outside of that, we really hadn't gotten, I'd say, inspired to give back. And after spending time with Jerry, it really, immediately, David and I sat down and said, we started to brainstorm on what we could do to give back. We implemented, I'm trying to remember, we implemented an annual Habitat for Humanity, where we would take a couple of days off, go, help build these homes, paint the insides of these homes. So that became a great team building activity. We started to set an annual budget, set money aside, 1% of our revenue to set aside and allow our employees to, end of the year, decide where they wanted that money to go. We would select a few nonprofits and then kind of let the employees vote on where they wanted that to go. So, I would like to have thought that seed was in us, and it just, someone would have come along and watered it. But, I think Jerry was crucial in having us just helping us think that way. I mean, it's the communities that keep us in business. I think too oftentimes, business owners kind of forget who it is that actually keeps them in business. And, there should just be a deep appreciation of the communities that support these products and these brands. So, I think that as business owners, we should think about how we can give back to these communities that keep us in business. And let's face it, we hit the jackpot. We live in America, educated, loving parents. To think that we actually deserve any of this. So I feel like that's we're obligated. It's not a privilege. It's an obligation.
Well, truthfully a very interesting mindset, right? And you talked about mindset, the learner versus knower, and approaching, the gifts that we have been given, being born in a country where freedom is a given. It's minimum table stakes, and that's not the case in many other parts of the world. So I agree with you 100%. And along those lines of making or having those types of recognitions, you had mentioned earlier that, and it was also in one of the interviews that I saw, one of the limited ones I could find, was there was a turning point for you where you recognized the value of winning as a team was far greater than being right. And you talked about this learner versus knower that you look for now in some of the ventures and entrepreneurs. And you made mention that you weren't always that way, that you wanted to have all the answers, that it was important for you to be right. But then there was this, what I perceived to be a turning point where hit you over the head that, wait a minute, winning as a team is far more meaningful than being right, and surrounding yourself with people who are phenomenal at what they do and building a cohesive team. I'm curious, was there a specific moment in time, a decision, an occurrence, something that led you to this minor or maybe major revelation that it's more important to win as a team than to be the guy with all the answers? There wasn't kind of that aha moment where the light bulb went off. I would say it was a series of events. Sweetleaf Tea, we certainly struggled in the early days, and we were on the edge of going out of business numerous times. I'm sure that could be a humbling experience by itself.
Yeah, a very humbling experience. But there was a mentor and one of our board members early on, a gentleman by the name of Bill McGoy, who he had the Snapple distributorship in Southern California. He was kind of the first money and even interim CEO at Oregon Chai when they were first getting going. He was just a phenomenal mentor, dear man, wonderful business person. And he was constantly pushing me to surround myself with smart people to learn. And I'd say, while I didn't use the term, I think he was the first person that I would say was really influential on encouraging me to get out of the knowers mindset. I think early on I was really intimidated by smart people. I never graduated from college, so there's probably some hang up there, that I had. And I can recall him encouraging me to find a CFO. We'd gotten to a level where, we really needed to get someone in place that was detail oriented, that was organized, that had a good handle on finances and could help put some of that discipline in place. And we weren't looking for someone just to kind of generate the reports. I was needing someone to really help me run the business that had a complementary skill set that was very different than mine. And so we brought in a gentleman by the name of Brian Goldberg, who's now the CFO at Amplify Brands, which is Skinny Pop, that recently went public. And Brian's a dear friend. But I mean, Brian was, master's in taxation, MBA. He had worked for Price Waterhouse, lived in Europe, running their tax practice over there, was in a venture capital firm for a number of years. I'm just a really sharp guy. We were about the same age, and I was very intimidated by him. When he first came, when he first joined Sweetleaf, he challenged me, a lot of the decisions, and I was kind of used to, just calling the shots and having people come to me and ask me what they should do. And that was kind of my MO at the time. And it was one of the biggest, it really held us back in the early days of Sweetleaf. And Brian was the first person that really challenged me on a day-to-day basis. And, I thought he was like out for my job. I think the first few months of the business, but and it was a painful transition. But I would say after 6 or so months, I really began to admire him, to respect him. And, we had a wonderful working relationship, and he's a dear friend to this day. But, so I would say it was more of a transformation. We didn't really start to grow at Sweetleaf until we started to hire experienced salespeople, folks like Brian Goldberg, true leaders that are experts in their particular field. And for me to get out of their way, and I think it was Steve Jobs that said, you don't hire great people to tell them what to do. You hire great people to get out of their way and give them the tools they need to succeed. So it was probably, I'd say, kind of a year-long process, painful process of me kind of moving to a place where I'd say I'm, started to be much more focused on winning than being right. And, everybody wants to say they'd rather win than be right, but it's one thing to say it. It's one thing to live it. And, I still have to kind of look myself in the mirror every day and on lots of different topics and situations when I feel my emotions rise up from within on a particular situation. I question my ego. I always want to say, where's my ego at play in this? Do I really want to win versus being right? And why am I feeling this way? So I think it's an ongoing process. I don't know if you ever kind of are completely free of our ego that can be a negative influence on our decisions and on our outlooks. So I think it's kind of an ongoing process of self-reflection, and I try to stay very aware of it. And I think one way is to make sure you surround yourself with people that are highly curious, that are opinionated, and that you make sure there's enough communication there so that there's trust in an environment where they are willing to, they're going to speak their mind, and they're going to call you into question and, shoot holes in your ideas and in your thoughts, even if just for the sake of making sure you get a better outcome. But, you got to be able to welcome that on a team, and those are the most highly functioning teams.
Yeah. So that said, and speaking to the comment you made earlier about many of the entrepreneurs that CAVU is investing in are first-time entrepreneurs, is it fairly easy for you and your team to spot how those entrepreneurs are coming into these situations, specifically around the desire to be right versus winning as a team? Is it can you detect that when you're working with some of these first-time entrepreneurs, and then able to leverage some of your journey and coach them appropriately from a place of obviously love and care and concern and wanting to help them grow. Has that come up?
Yeah, with some folks, it's easier. You can discover more quickly than with others. Sometimes it's in a very short conversation. You can kind of discover is someone more of a learner versus a knower. But with others, it takes longer. But it's definitely something that we're focused on, that we look for. And it's also something that we're absolutely committed and and helping coach a lot of these entrepreneurs. And it's something, especially with the first time kind of early stage ones. I mean, we let them know from day one. One of the biggest risks is this company going to outgrow you? And the biggest insurance policy that any first-time entrepreneur can create for themselves is to, hire the best and the brightest around them, and to give those people the tools to lead and to, ask lots of questions. I'm going to have an entrepreneur that comes in a, particular space that I've spent, 20 years working in, and all they want to do is, tell me how great their product is and how great their business idea is, and they don't ask any questions. Usually that's a red flag. I mean, the best entrepreneurs I've seen are asking as many questions as they, you're kind of asking while you're pitching. And I know while we were raising our fund, and this was genuine, this wasn't saying, I mean, we knew there's going to be plenty of interest to have people kind of invest in our fund, but that truly the more sophisticated investors out there, a lot of the family offices and a couple of the institutional investors we have, I'd say, in a couple of instances, over half the discussion, half our meeting was taken up by, me asking them questions about what are the most highly functioning, venture capital and private equity teams that they work with, and what separates good from great outside of their investments. Their practices, or their, what are these firms doing that are, creating over a long period of time better returns, just more successful environments, ability to recruit, top tier team members, associates, analysts, vice presidents. So, I was genuinely curious, because I know that there's, we need to bring people onto our team at CAVU that have forgotten more than we know, about kind of the professional investment landscape, about managing a fund. And so who better to learn from than people that, the institutional investors that invest in these funds for a living.
Sure.
And so that was, that was very helpful. I learned a lot through that process. And I think, obviously, I think it obviously resonated, I think, with a lot of those folks, because they ended up investing in the fund.
So just for a moment, talking about the fund and the private equity and the venture capital world, and having spent some considerable time and continuing to do so in the conscious capitalism movement, and through that having exposure to some pretty new age, if you will, or certainly new thinking type organizations like a Satori, and many of their funds, if not all, having these extended lifespans of decades, so that it gives them and their ventures the opportunity to make really smart decisions that are both connects the near term and the far term, as opposed to this Wall Street driven quarterly financial return, maximizing shareholder value only, as opposed to the stakeholder centric model, which I do believe, and I'm sure you do as well, and clearly Satori does, that you need to create more runway. You need to create a little bit more space for these entrepreneurs to make the right decisions that are going to help them advance the organization for the long run. Have you seen other firms like a Satori that are doing super interesting things to really rewrite the rules of what private equity and venture capital can be about?
I mean, I would say it's more, I feel like, the exception versus the rule. I do feel like it's changing, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm not real close with Satori, but I've certainly heard their name out there. And I love that those types of firms are, getting more visibility because, as they have one financial success and as they get publicity, that can help create change with other within the investing community. I think ultimately what it's going to come down to is there's got to be performance.
Oh, for sure.
But when you do the right thing and when you approach the relationship that you have with your investments, with the management teams, with the entrepreneurs, is one of trust and of high integrity, and is not managed by legal documents and is not financially over-engineered. And when you're really looking out, trying to create a win-win situation, which I've just seen firsthand, unfortunately, far too many times, situations where the investors will jeopardize and hurt the relationship and the trust with these CEOs and the founders in order to make a few more points of return. I've been on the receiving end of it, and it's very unfortunate trying to bury sophisticated financial instruments, in the legal docs and not explain them very clearly in the term sheets. So that sort of stuff, it hurts trust, and over time, those firms, they build a reputation for that. I'm certainly not going to name any names, but there's a number of firms in our industry, in the consumer products industry, that are private equity firms that are focused on consumer products, that they're not going to get the best deals, because the best entrepreneurs with the best products that have, that are the most successful kind of up and comers, the hottest brands, they're going to have their pick of who they go with, and the smartest entrepreneurs are going to do their homework. A sharp entrepreneur should investigate and do their background checks as much on the private equity firm, the investment firm that's investing in them, as the investment firm should do in the company. And as you start to make, as these CEOs make calls to other CEOs of portfolio companies that are within these investment firms, of CEOs that have exited, that had been in the portfolio company, you learn a lot that way. And, I think that over time, I'm a big believer in the karma bank. And if you do the right thing and you treat the entrepreneur fairly and you encourage prospective CEOs, prospective investments, the CEOs of those companies, to do their homework and to call around and to make the introductions to, all the companies that we've invested in, that your reputation over time will win. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all we have. And, long term, whether it's the Satori Capitals of the world, or whether it's, the CAVUs of the world, as we certainly aspire to be, I think over time, you're going to get access to the best deals, because the smartest entrepreneurs are going to know that it's not about trying to squeeze every single penny they can out of a term sheet. It's looking for a long-term partner that they can trust, that is going to totally shoot straight with them. And, that sort of healthy relationship is going to create a better company. It's going to create a better environment, on a board level. When you have I'm sure a lot of people have heard, like, there've been MRIs of the brain. When you look at the blood flow within the brain, when someone is in a fear mentality, and I've seen it too often in board settings, it completely stifles creativity, versus when you're in a place of trust and you're in a place of safety, and the creative part of our brains are much more active. So when you're in that kind of that fear mode, and you feel like you're going to have a board member that's going to jump all over you, or that you don't trust, you got to be careful what you say. I mean, we operate in the fight or flight mode.
Yep.
And I've had numerous conversations with CEOs of boards that I'm on, having to work through a problem board member and they lose sleep over it, and the board meetings can be incredibly unproductive. But if we can, work to create that place where there's trust and there's safety, those entrepreneurs, those companies are more likely to perform much better, and those investments should do better. And I think just over time, the investment firms that take that approach are going to get the best deals, and their companies are going to perform better when there's a high level of trust there.
Yep. I absolutely agree. So I want to just wind things up, maybe just transition for a moment to kind of a lighter note, if you will. And this has been great. I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us this morning. Given that you created and sold an incredibly successful vodka company, I think there's a lot of folks out there who probably grew up just like me. I had no idea back, 25 or so years ago when I graduated from school what it was I was going to do with my life. And there's lots of folks out there like that. And the thought of working in the beverage industry probably sounds like an incredibly exciting place to spend time. I'm curious, as someone who has created and sold a very successful beverage company, multiple, but focusing on Deep Eddy, at least for a moment, what's the sexiest thing about working in the beverage industry, and what's the least sexiest thing about working in it?
Interesting. The sexy. Well, it doesn't get much sexier than the liquor industry. The spirits industry is a fun place. It's so marketing driven.
Sure.
Obviously we were able to really set ourselves apart at Deep Eddy just because of the quality of the ingredients, using real juices instead of artificial flavors to flavor our product with. So we were able to set ourselves apart, and I believe that's ultimately why we succeeded, and just fueled phenomenal growth. But let's face it, you do your marketing in bars, and at music festivals. So I'd say that the sexiest thing about being in the beverage industry, whether it was at Sweet Leaf, most of our marketing was done at music festivals, whether either demos or music festivals. We did a lot of music festivals around the country, and it's just a great place to create that love affair with consumers in your brand. So we took a lot of those kind of plays from our playbook and implemented them at Deep Eddy. So I'd say that's definitely the sexiest part, is just getting to hang out in, really fun environments and bring that brand to life, and to integrate that brand, your brand, within those events, so that it feels like your event, and consumers, like I said, that's kind of where the best place for them to discover your brand. So that was definitely, I'd say, kind of the sexiest part. Outside of, it was quite often you'd see some heavy taste testing going on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, whether it was on a Tuesday or a Thursday. So that was not uncommon at all. And, I'd say the least sexy thing, if I had to try to think, just beverages in particular. Gosh, it's tough. It's such a wonderful industry. The spirits industry, the natural food industry, which is really where my heart is in the natural food industry. I love the spirits industry, but the natural food industry is really where my heart is. But there's still people issues. You still have you're still running a business. You're negotiating compensation packages with folks. You're unfortunately every now and then having to let someone go that's not performing. That's tough. And if anyone says that firing someone, letting someone go is not the worst part of business, I can't imagine. So luckily I haven't had to do it too many times, but I've had to do it enough, and I'm sure may have to do it a few more times in my lifetime. But having to let someone go is that's by far it's the toughest thing. It has to be done, and it's typically not done quickly enough. But just the messy people issues that inevitably come up because we're human, we're complex, and having to deal with that is probably the less sexy, but it's definitely the most important part is dealing with your team members. But Brian, thanks so much for the interest
Yeah.
And it was great getting a chance to visit with you. And thanks for doing what you do.
Likewise, Clayton. Really a pleasure, man. Wish you and your team at CAVU nothing but the best. And frankly, all the things that you're involved in right now, it's almost too numerous to mention. So I hope to run into you at an upcoming Conscious Capitalism conference in Chicago, or maybe the CEO Summit in Austin later this year.
Let's do it. I look forward to it.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Until next time, thank you for listening, folks. You can obtain a transcribed version of this show and hear more interviews from the Built on Purpose podcast by visiting our website, yscouts.com/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, there's a couple of additional things I have for you. Number one, I'm hoping to get some bonus questions answered by Clayton from our community. So if you have any questions you'd like him to answer, please drop me a line at brian@yscouts.com with your question, and I'll forward them on. If you enjoyed this episode, there's a couple of others I think you'll love. Barry Schwartz, who gave us one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time, is featured on one of our episodes talking about why we work. Another favorite episode of mine is with Kat Taylor, the co-founder and co-CEO of Beneficial State Bank. In it, she'll explore her perspective of what needs to happen in the banking industry. Again, that URL is yscouts.com/podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.